Hi everybody. So today I'm going to be talking about the inflammatory response, and what the inflammatory response is it's basically the processes or what your body does to protect you from things such as bacteria or viruses. So let's go ahead and get started. And what you're looking at right here is you're looking at a blood vessel. This is the inside of the blood vessel. This here and here are called endothelial cells. They actually line the inside of blood vessels. Down here can be any tissue. You see we have individual cells, and then we have the cells all make up a tissue. So it can be any tissue you want in the body. This space that's in here is what we call the interstitial space. Okay, so this is going to be my interstitial space. The interstitial space is basically between the blood vessels and the cell membranes. Okay, so everything in here is going to be known as the interstitial space. So let's go ahead and get started. And as you can see, we actually have individual endothelial cells here that are making up the lining of the blood vessel, like I said. Okay, now, and here's where your red blood cells would be flowing. Okay, so let's say we have a bacteria come into our body, and here's the bacteria here. Okay, and for the most part, on bacteria, they have markers. They have protein markers on them, or it could be a lipid marker. And we call these antigens. And for the most part, antigens are anything that cause an immune response. Okay, so there's going to be my antigens. My antigens are the yellow part. So when my body the orange part. When my body sees these orange proteins, or they could be a lipid, or they could be a protein lipid, right? When it sees those, it knows that this does not belong in this area, and it needs to get it out, or it needs to do something such as kill it. So here's what's going to happen is, let's say we have this bacteria, and we're going to say this is a gram-negative bacteria, and this bacteria is going to release a toxin. It's going to release an endotoxin. Okay, so we're going to call this an endotoxin. So this is my gram-negative bacteria. There's my endotoxin. When the endotoxin gets to the cell membrane, what it's going to do is it's going to destroy this. And the reason it does is because my bacteria wants nutrients. So it starts to destroy the cell membrane. Okay? Now, the cell can also respond to this. So what the cell's going to do is it actually has enzymes on the cell membrane, which are known as phospholipid A2. So this is my phospholipid A2, my PLA2, phospholipid A2, and that's an enzyme. What the enzyme will do is it will take the lipids on the cell membrane and it will turn these into what we call arachidonic acid. Okay, it's going to turn it into arachidonic acid, okay? Now, what's going to happen now with the arachidonic acid is some other enzymes are going to break this down, and it's going to break this down into leukotrienes and also break it down to something called prostaglandins. Okay, so my arachidonic acid has been broken down into leukotrienes and into prostaglandins, okay? Now, the other thing that's going to happen is inside the interstitial area, it could be in the bloodstream too, but in this case we're going to say in the interstitial area, you have a type of cell that's called a mast cell. These endotoxins, and it has receptors on it, so these endotoxins can actually either try to destroy the mast cell, right? They can try to destroy the mast cell, or they could actually bond with these receptors that are on the mast cell. When it does that, the mast cell is now going to do something similar to this. It's going to produce leukotrienes, prostaglandins, but it's also going to produce something called histamine. Now, if you've ever had an allergy attack, what you'll do is you'll go to the store and you'll get something called an antihistamine, which will stop these from working. Okay, these are why you get the red eyes and the runny nose and the watery eyes, all right? That's the histamines. Another thing that's going to be produced is something called bradykinin. Okay, so this is something else that's going to be produced. Now, on these endothelial cells, you have receptors. Okay, you have receptors on it. I'm just drawing these right here. Imagine these receptors go the whole way down on each side, and they would also be up on here. Okay, what's going to happen is these right here, all of these that you see right here, which by the way, these are called cytokines. What's going to happen is they are going to bond to these receptors, okay? Now I'm making it look like each receptor is specific for each one. It's really not. So they're going to bond to those receptors. What's going to happen next is you have muscles inside the blood vessel that contract to keep the blood vessel small. When you want to open up the blood vessel, those muscles relax. These cytokines will cause the muscles to relax that are keeping this blood vessel this size. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase this top line here to give you an idea of what this would look like. My blood vessel is going to open up, okay? So if I take this off, and I'm just going to draw a line up here to show my open blood vessel. So now you can see my blood vessel has gotten larger. Okay, I know you can't, it's hard to see, but this part's not important right now. But you can see the blood vessel's gotten larger. Now, the reason the blood vessel gets larger is we want to start bringing more blood to the area because we need to bring more white blood cells to the area. That's one thing that's going to happen, okay? So, the second thing that's going to happen is not only does it cause the vasodilation, right? The blood vessel got bigger and we're starting to get more blood, but inside the bloodstream we have something called plasma. Plasma is basically the watery part of blood. When these bond to this, what's going to happen is it is going to open up, or it's going to cause these endothelial cells to contract just a little bit. And when they contract, as you notice, there's actually spaces between them now. So what's going to happen now is my plasma is going to start to leave from the inside of the blood vessel. So when plasma leaves from the inside of the blood vessel and comes down into this interstitial area, it's now called interstitial fluid. So here comes my plasma, right? And it's coming out of the area now. Okay? A few things are going to happen here. Is first, because I have fluid going from inside here and there's more fluid here, this is called edema. You're going to get swelling in here, okay? So we're going to get edema or swelling. Because I'm getting more of this fluid, this area is going to become warm also because I'm just getting more warm fluid added to this area. So it's going to become warm. And we're also going to get redness, okay? The other thing that's going to happen here is way down here on these cells, you have receptors. And these receptors are called nociceptors. Okay, so these are my nociceptors that are right here. That's a nociceptor right there. That's a nociceptor right there. So these are nociceptors. And again, imagine these are going to go throughout the whole thing. I'm kind of just cramming it into right here. Well, what happens is, as I start to get the increase or more fluid coming in, I start to get more fluid in this area. So what's going to happen now is this fluid is actually going to start pushing on these nociceptors. When they push on the nociceptors, what's going to happen is it's going to cause pain. These are pain fibers, right? So it's going to cause pain because it's putting pressure on these nociceptors. So the other thing that's going to happen from these opening up is we are going to get pain. Okay, these are the classic signs of inflammation. You get swelling, you get warm, the air becomes warm, you get redness because I'm getting more fluids out into there, and you also get some pain. Okay, let's look at what else can happen. So I'm just going to move this over just a little bit. And here's what else can happen when these receptors are on there. And remember, these have all contracted too. I'm not showing it, but these also would have contracted, right? So here's what's going to happen. Is inside of these endothelial cells, you have granules. Okay, and remember, this goes along the whole way. When these cytokines bond to these receptors, these granules are going to migrate towards the inside of the blood vessel. When they get to the other end, what's going to happen is they are going to cause some proteins to pop up. Okay, and these are basically receptors. We call these selectins. Okay, and in this case, these are called p-selectins. Now, if you notice, they look like a backwards F, right? Well, you have white blood cells that are coming through this area now. You have monocytes, right? And you have neutrophils, among others. So this is going to be my monocyte right here. This is going to be, let's go purple. This is going to be my neutrophil. And if you notice, on the bottom of these, they have receptors that attach onto these selectin proteins here, right? So basically what these do is they kind of stop it and they say, we need help, okay? I need to get a little bit more space in here, so I'm going to erase this right in here. And what's going to happen is after these have been stopped, first of all, they don't get stopped right away. What's going to happen is they're actually going to roll along a little bit and keep hitting these receptors. And eventually what's going to happen is they're going to leave the bloodstream, okay? So on the inside of my endothelial cells, I also have something else called pCAMs. Okay, these are going to be called pCAMs. Okay? Now, as these get to this opening right here, this is going to come through here, but if you notice, that's small and that's large. So it's going to have to actually kind of squeeze through here, okay? And so it's going to come through and squeeze, and this is going to do the same thing. And again, I have this all along here, even though I'm showing it in one area. Eventually, these are going to come out. By the way, the fact that it's squeezing through there is called diapedesis. Okay, that's that basically squishy motion to get through there, okay? So now, this is going to come out into this area here, right? Here's my monocyte, here. And here is my neutrophil. Okay, and my monocyte is right there. Okay, so here's what's going to happen now. If you notice, my bacteria is still all the way over here. So I need these to come over to here to attack this. What's going to happen is these cytokines are going to bond to receptors on one side of these white blood cells. When they come over and bond to the receptors on this one side, and remember, you have receptors all over, it's just this one side is the side that these are bonded to. So these are going to come over and they're going to bond onto here. Okay, so you got to realize you've produced enough to do this, but you're also producing enough to come over here. When it does, two things will happen. First, these are not called cytokines, they're called chemokines, right? And they're going to tell these, you need to come over here to get this bacteria. You need to come over here to get this bacteria, right? So what's going to happen is those are going to come over here. Now, when a white blood cell goes to an area to help, we call that chemotaxis. Okay, so my cytokines did not only do this, cause the p-selectins to pop up, cause the vasodilation, cause the constriction of the endothelial cells, so plasma can leak out, which led to edema, warmness, and redness and pain, but it also led to chemotaxis. Now, here's what's going to happen now is, let's just say the bacteria is over here, right? Here's my bacteria again. So when my bacteria, or when my white blood cells go to attack the bacteria, they're going to do a few different things. The first thing it's going to do is it is going to release, my monocyte is going to release something called interleukin-1 and tumor necrotic factor alpha. Okay, so it's going to secrete tumor necrotic factor alpha. We call this TNF alpha for short. Okay, it's also going to secrete something called interleukin 8. Now, what's going to happen is interleukin 8 is now going to go and bond, or it's going to stimulate these cells also, and we're going to get more proteins, more selectins, but these are going to be called E-selectins. Okay, those are called E-selectins. Now, these here are already made. So when your body needs these, it just produces them. And this part happens almost immediately. Interleukin 1, tumor necrotic factor, and interleukin 8 all need to be made. See, these are already made, they're ready to go. These need to be made when they find out there's a problem. So what's going to happen is these are actually going to go, and it's going to cause these E-selectins to pop up. The other thing that's it's going to do is it's going to bond with receptor. Now, once again, my white blood cells are going to attach onto here, right? And they're going to have something called integrins, right? They're basically going to have some proteins attached. When this bonds to there, this becomes activated. Now, you also have some other selectins here, all right, which are going to be on the membrane. And when these become activated, it's going to roll over and attach to this. And then it's going to do the diapedesis, and it's going to be the same thing as we saw before. However, the other thing that tumor necrotic factor and interleukin 1 are going to do is they are going to go to the brain. And when they go to the brain, they are going to cause the release of something called PGE2. PGE2 is going to create a fever. Now, the reason you have fevers is it's almost like frying an egg. If I can up the body temperature, what I can do is I can break down proteins in this bacteria, and when I break down the proteins in that bacteria, it's like a fried egg. It's basically, this will die, and it can't go back to the way it was. So it's going to denature proteins. The other thing a fever is going to do is it's going to up your metabolism. When it ups your metabolism, what's going to happen is you can heal faster. The other thing that's going to happen with the tumor necrotic factor and the interleukin 1 is they can go to the bone marrow. So they can also go to bone marrow. And what they're going to do is they can increase the number of white blood cells that the bone marrow produces. So, if we were to go back and look at this real quick, let me bring you back over here. If we go back and look at this real quick, what we have is we have a bacteria that comes in. When the bacteria comes in, it releases an endotoxin. The endotoxin, if it destroys the cell membrane, PLA2 will take lipids in the cell membrane, phospholipids in the cell membrane, and turn them into arachidonic acid. The arachidonic acid is broken down into leukotrienes and prostaglandins, which are known as cytokines. The endotoxin can either go and start destroying the mast cell like it's doing here, or if it bonds to receptor, it will cause the mast cell to become stimulated. The mast cell is going to release histamine, leukotrienes, and prostaglandins. The leukotriene, histamines, and prostaglandins will go up to receptors on the endothelium of our white blood cells. It will cause granules to migrate towards the inner cell membrane of the endothelium, which will cause P-selectins to pop up. The P-selectins kind of become receptors for white blood cells that are passing by, in this case neutrophils and monocytes. They will catch that. They basically roll over and over, catching these P-selectins until they get to a certain area where they can go out between the cells. They squeeze between these endothelial cells, right? And we have P-camps there. They squeeze between the endothelial cells, which is called diapedesis. Once outside, these cytokines act as chemokines, right? Because they're going to tell these guys, hey, monocyte and neutrophil, come over here. We need you to fight this bacteria that's right here. The bad guy's over here. At the same time that's going on, Well, let's go ahead and finish this. So what the next thing that's going to happen is we are going to produce when these go to attack, we're going to produce interleukin-1 and tumor necrotic factor alpha, and interleukin-8. Interleukin-8 will basically go and bond to a receptor and cause E-selectins to basically pop out, just like we saw with the P-selectins over here. When it does that on our white blood cells, I didn't draw them over here, but you have something called integrins. These will become activated and they will attach onto receptors that are on here. Instead of PCAMs, these are called ICAMs and BCAMs. It will bond to that, and then this will come out also. So it's basically almost the same process as over here. This just happens a little later on in the inflammatory response because these white blood cells have to make these. Now, the tumor necrotic factor and the interleukin-1 will go to the brain. Oops, they're going to go to the hypothalamus in the brain. Okay, I don't know if you can read that. That says hypothalamus. They're going to go to the hypothalamus in the brain. They're going to make an enzyme called PGE2, which is going to reset the body temperature, and you're going to get a fever. The reason you get a fever is because it can denature proteins, which will break this down like a fried egg, and it also increases metabolism, so that way you can heal faster. Now, the other part that's going to happen in my inflammatory response is, like we said at the beginning, you have muscles that make this blood vessel constrict. When these bond onto here, those muscles will relax. When those muscles relax, this opens up in size. Now I can get more blood coming to the area, right? I get more blood, I get more white blood cells coming to the area also to help fight this attack. The other thing that's going to happen here is, like we said, we also get constriction of the endothelial cells. So when we get constriction of the endothelial cells, we get spaces, and plasma could come out. Now you may be wondering, where's the PCAMs? They're there, I just didn't draw them. Plasma comes out. When plasma leaves the bloodstream and gets into this area here, and it's not inside cells, it's called interstitial fluid. So what's going to happen now is, because the plasma comes out, I'm putting more fluid into this area, we get edema, we get swelling, right? It also is going to become warmer because of the fact that plasma is warm. I'm adding more warm fluid to a warm area already. We're going to get redness because it's coming out of the bloodstream. As the edema expands and grows, it's going to press on nociceptors. Nociceptors are responsible for the receptors that are responsible for the perception of pain, or the reception of pain. Sensation of pain is what I'm trying to think of. So the edema presses on those and we get pain. Now, the other thing I could add in here is you can also limit your range of motion in different joints because of the fact that you get pain. I think anyone who's ever sprained an ankle knows it's really hard to move the ankle when you have the pain. So that's basically it for the inflammatory response, and thank you so much for watching the video.